Thanks for reminding me. Yeah, so like I was saying, individualism of the classical variety, though it talks about the social contract, talks about the civil society, but the society there and what exactly are the functions of the society are those which are not at all defined in that form of liberalism, which is classical liberalism. So, society state, yes, has a reasonably clear definition, but society doesn't have that kind of definition. It seems to be some kind of an abstract organization, and it doesn't delve into what that nature of that society is and how in that society people relate to each other. You don't find that people relating to each other. Whereas in the Rawlsian form of individualism, you find that there is a most seriously definition of a society, and there is a system of obligation that Rawls places uh, uh, places great emphasis on. Okay, yesterday I had talked to you about the primary social goods, and he says that for probably centuries, uh, some people in society have cornered the primary social goods, and because of the fact that they cornered those primary social goods, they automatically start enjoying things which are denied to others who do not have access to those primary natural goods. Now, I had mentioned that the main primary natural good that he talks about is political rights. Okay, now when we are talking about political rights in the Rawlsian sense of the term, we will have to understand it a lot differently from how we understand political rights. For us, our political rights are those which are bestowed to us by the Constitution. But if you remember the point that I made yesterday, that in Rawls there is no specific mention of uh, government and state. So you have to see these two things in conjunction. So, what are political rights if they are not located within the state and in the government? Right. So, political rights assume a completely different significance in John Rawls. What you find in John Rawls is that he does not think that the government and the state are capable of delivering to people what they are supposed to. So, like I told you, if you look at the antebellum laws that existed uh, in the 19th century in the United States of America. Um, those laws were there on paper. Most states had their own individual constitutions, and the Confederates, as they came to be called during the Civil War, located their capital in Richmond, in Virginia, but they kept slaves. And slaves are people without rights. Now, the Constitution of the United States of America talked about all the freedoms that we associate with liberalism: freedom, free thinking, freedom of speech, free will, free market. It talks about all those. So, when you are talking about all these things in the Constitution, then where is the provision that tells you that you can own people, that you can actually own people? Where is that particular clause? So it basically means that if you don't implement a legal system, it's as good as being non existent. That is a point you have to understand. And Rawls had seen that this had happened in the United States of America itself. He's not imagining things. He's certainly not imagining things. He had seen that the state and the government had failed quite miserably in delivering the freedoms to the people. So the political rights primarily emphasize on these freedoms, not so much the market, but the other three freedoms. Okay, free thinking, freedom of speech, and free will. And he also will put in his system of political rights other things, which is access to the prime to those things that contribute to your becoming a success in society. So he is taking the principle that was used by Locke, which was that everybody gets an equality of beginning. And if there is an inequality in society, that is an inequality of consequence. So, in the Lockean sense, all inequalities are natural, they are not social or man made. But having seen liberalism for nearly 3 centuries, Locke has a different picture. Locke sees that people have cornered these political rights, which is not the right to vote. Please remember that. Not just the right to vote. Even today, the right to vote in America is a farce. Everyone knows. Uh, America should be called a farcical democracy. And if you look at that, he's not talking about those things. He's talking about various other things that contribute to an individual being able to compete with those who have for a very long time cornered all the uh, primary social goods. So the political rights is not an end in itself, it's a means to an end. And the end is to give to people what they have been deprived of for no fault of theirs except the accident of birth. And please remember, even the early slaves who came to America didn't come to America on their own volition. They were picked up by Dutch traders. They were packed like sardines in a boat and they were sent off to the States. If they actually fell ill, they were just taken from the group of people in which they are sitting. They don't have place to lie down. They just sat through the journey. They were just picked up, thrown into the sea. So that is the level of treatment that was meted out to the black people. So they didn't want to go to America. They were quite happy in Africa. You dislocate them, you make a commodity out of them, you sell them, and people buy them as commodities. And in the southern side, this was more pronounced, the southern states of the United States of America, this was much more pronounced. And you will see that there was segregation, total segregation, which means that the south, the southern side of America had a predominantly Spanish population, and they refused to interact with the blacks, the Africans. And you will see that they are basically talking uh, about just getting their work done. Then they are these people are left to live in their camps, and the whites continued with their lifestyle. So there was segregation, and it is because of that you will find that the Africans were able to maintain their original culture. So despite all the big talk that America does about how it is a melting pot of cultures, nothing melts. In fact, in America, identities are those which get more and more solidified and consolidated. So political rights will also tell you that you shouldn't allow for this to happen. You shouldn't allow for this to happen. Okay. And it'll become clearer to you as I keep talking. And he's appealing directly to the people. Please remember that. He's appealing directly to the people because he doesn't think either the government or the state are capable of doing anything. We know Donald Trump was somebody who was catapulted to the presidency by those people who are called the rednecks. Rednecks because they lynched people and so their necks became red. Okay, the neo-Nazis who believe in the superiority of the whites, and the xenophobes. Xenophobes are those who are afraid of foreigners. And you will see that all these people are actually the ones, all these people are the ones that supported Donald Trump. And they don't want to give equality to others. So, funnily enough, in this whole system that we are talking about is political rights, apart from education, apart from nutrition, apart from providing a good quality of life, a healthy life. Apart from all that, there is also a mention of how people have to part with their primary social rights to ensure social goods, to ensure that there is an equality of beginning. Otherwise, Rawls said, people will continue to rot where they are. They are not going to come out of where they are. Okay, so Rawls became a very popular man in Europe. Very, very popular man in Europe because Europe, I told you, has seen a lot of intellectual turmoil. It has seen Marxism, it has seen anarchism, and even in India, Rawls is a very revered figure because of the fact that in India too, people know what the accident of birth is. But in America, no, Rawls is not, at least not among the whites, because the whites, most of them are white supremacists. They believe in their own superiority. Though they don't say it because America is a nation which is politically very correct, politically very correct when they talk to people. But when they talk among themselves, they talk very differently. Just let me give you an example. I keep telling you about this Google landing party that used to come to our house every weekend. And quite a few of them, there were two things that happened with this. The first thing you should understand is most of them thought I was unemployed. Most of them initially, they thought I was unemployed because I was living with my parents. So my parents were on the first floor and I am on the second floor. They thought I'm living with my parents, so that means I don't have an employment. But when they came to know that I am actually a professor in a university and that I knew about America's history, some of them took a liking for me. I also used to be politically correct with them. And then one evening, there were three of us, two whites and me. These guys got completely sloshed, sozzled, and somehow I said, there are instances when I feel that I am a bit of a misanthrope. Sometimes I feel like that, is what I said. A misanthrope, an anthrope is a human being. And if you say somebody is a misanthrope, then it basically means one who doesn't like human beings. And the immediate reaction to this from these two people, by then we had become very close friends, was that, yeah, we have wondered how you fit into this dreadful Indian society. It's full of horrible people. Even the so-called educated and all, they are, what are they? They are nothing. They are zilch. How do you fit into it? That is what when we talk amongst ourselves, we have raised this question so many times. And now you say that you're a misanthrope. I said, I'm not a misanthrope. I tend to think like a misanthrope sometimes. I said, yeah, whatever. Now we understand that you don't fit in here. So a little bit of alcohol and the political correctness is gone and the truth comes out. So political rights is this thing of granting equality also, at least in the beginning, equality of beginning. Okay, so what we should be looking at is that while he's talking, no, I won't do this point first. Let me do this. The social contract has always been a bit of a mystery. It has been a subject of scholars of different hues trying to understand society. And whoever it is that prepared your uh, syllabus talk about the origins of the state as divine right, historical, social contractualist, which basically means they don't really understand what the social contract is. And it has eluded the best of minds. It has bamboozled the best of minds. Like, for example, George Sabine is completely, completely flummoxed by the Hobbesian social contract. Hobbes says that the individuals in the state of nature are pre-social. There's no society in the Hobbesian state of nature. There he is basically arguing that people shoot out of the ground like mushrooms. That's what Hobbes says about the people in the social contract. And he says it's a war of all against all. He says life in the state of nature is solitary, nasty, brutish, and short. Having said all these things, he also says that man is a rational being, realizes that he needs to preserve his existence, which he calls rational self-preservation. So in order to preserve his existence, he enters into a social contract. Now, this is what has created a great deal of confusion in Sabine, who is otherwise a pretty good scholar. Sabine, by the way, is also one of the Germanic tribes. So this is the only man that I know who has his tribal name as his surname. So Sabine argues that there is a great inconsistency in Hobbes. Why is there a great inconsistency in Hobbes? Because first of all, you're saying that the people are in a pre-social this thing, and that the state of nature is a war of all against all, and that life there is solitary, nasty, brutish, and short. So how come these people suddenly turn rational? How do they suddenly turn rational and say, okay, uh, we'll enter into a social contract? What happened to their rationality initially? Now, it's only after, I think, with C.B. Macpherson that you have an answer to that properly, an answer to that question properly given. But in the case of John Rawls, he demystifies the social contract of any variety completely, because Locke, sorry, Rawls also claims that there is some kind of a social contract in him, some kind of a metaphorical state of nature in his work. So he, while explaining that, demystifies the social contract. So let me tell you how he does it. Now, when I talked about political rights and I talked about the inclusion of the concept of equality, at least to ensure an equality of beginning, when he's doing that, he's doing it in the context of what he calls justice. He puts this word bang in the middle of his form of liberalism. His work is a tremendous piece of writing. It's huge. And when he criticizes the utilitarians, it does become a little dense. Otherwise, there is a tremendous clarity in his writing. And he talks about justice. He says liberalism made the biggest mistake, so to speak, by not recognizing justice, not recognizing the necessity for justice. So, what you find in Rawlsian liberalism is a central position to justice. That is why the book is not called something else. It's called A Theory of Justice. And that great Indian idiot, Amartya Sen, who also wrote a book on justice, he begins with this prefatory remark where he says, since Hobbes, nobody has talked about justice. You mean to say Marx didn't exist? You mean to say Rawls didn't exist? I don't know how he got the Nobel Prize. Seriously. I don't know how he got the Nobel Prize. So, and he wrote a book like that, saying that since Rawls there has been no debate on justice. When there is an entire tradition, scholarship of Marxism and even post-Rawlsian scholarship, his students like Joshua Cohen have talked about deliberative democracy, in which they talk about justice. Will Kimlicka and others have talked about multiculturalism and the necessity for multiculturalism to do justice to different cultures. After all these things, this man writes a book and says, since Hobbes, nobody has talked about justice. Good for him that he got a Nobel Prize.
In
Okay,
argumentative, yes, sir. In other,
sorry.
in argumentative Indian or
No, he wrote a book called Justice.
separate.
Yeah, not the argumentative Indian. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. He wrote a book on justice. So,
Sir, only economists are given Nobel Prize, but not for the.
mainly economic, but he also tried to widen it, widen the scope of the discussion. He did try to widen the scope of the discussion. I don't think much of his scholarship anyway on that in that book, and even the argumentative Indian. It is putting Indians down. There's nothing wrong with being argumentative. It is through argument. If you settle your quarrels, you settle your differences of opinion through arguments. What's wrong with that? Why do you have to derogatorily call Indians argumentative? You mean to say their other civilizations are so meek that they don't argue? That's rubbish. Complete rubbish. Anyway, so when he's talking about, he's not against capitalism, but he's locating justice in capitalist vocabulary. That is his greatness. Because when Marx talked about justice, he talked about it in the context of overcoming capitalism and introducing socialism or communism. And through that, he talked about having justice. He said justice is not possible within the premises of capitalism. But Rawls is saying no. So, what is, if Madam Padmanavanand likes to ask questions, in a sentence, tell me what does something mean? So, here it is. I am giving you an answer, Madam. Uh,
Yes, sir.
the answer about what is justice in Rawls. Okay, justice in Rawls. Justice is fairness. I deliberately put that in capital F. Fairness, being fair to everyone, not the fair and lovely thing. And so suddenly, uh, people have now decided in India, we are also becoming like the stupid Americans. uh, that saying things like facial cream will make you fair and all that is a bad thing. uh, so what if you don't say it openly? You still think about it, right? You do think about it because most Indians like to see people looking fair rather than uh, dark. Okay, so just because you don't say it in a brand's name or you don't make a public utterance out of it, it doesn't mean that the thought process has changed. So fair and lovely has become what? Low and lovely or something. Anyway, so so much for our idiocies. We are idiots, not the way Amartya Sen makes us out to be, but in other ways. So, what is the point that I'm trying to make? He's saying that justice is fairness. That is the crux of Rawlsian thinking. Being fair, sorry, being fair to everyone. Okay, that is what justice is.
Sir, he wrote two books. One is Theory of Justice, one is Justice is Fairness.
No,
Two different books, no?
no. It's in a theory of justice that he talks about justice being fairness. Justice as fairness is a collected works. He
Okay,
wrote a number of papers uh, which have been brought out as a book that has been written, that has been titled Justice as Fairness.
okay.
That's his collected works, papers that he had written, many papers post a theory of justice, post a theory of justice.
Yes.
Okay. And he's such a, I admire him. He doesn't call his theory the theory, he calls it a theory. And he's asking you to decide for yourself if it is a theory which is correct or not. He's not calling it the theory of justice. The definitive article is used by the great Mr. Amartya Sen. Okay. So when he talks about a justice, he's talking about it as fairness. And it is in this whole justice is fairness things that we find him including uh, yet another word which just had no place in liberal thought and liberal societies, which is I want you to pay careful attention to this. A lot of people will tell you that uh, justice, as seen by uh, Rawls, is a distributive form. It's a distributive form, which it is not. It is not distribution at all. A thesis came to me for adjudication. It turned out to be a person I know. It's a terrible thesis. Really, really a terrible thesis on Rawls. First and foremost, she calls it trajectories of liberalism. What is a trajectory of liberalism? There's no trajectory of liberalism. Are you going to go do a mathematical calculation? Which angle? How much force? You say strands of liberalism, not trajectories. You shoot a bullet, it has a trajectory. You shoot an arrow, it has trajectory. Liberalism having a trajectory? That's complete. So starting there, the rubbish begins. The rubbish is compounded by talking about Rawls's a theory of justice as the theory of justice throughout that particular thesis. Throughout that particular thesis. Okay, she calls it the theory of justice. Now, how am I to assume that you've even seen that book? And she says it is distributive justice. It is not distributive justice. I raised these questions in the Viva, and she kept saying, no, no, it is distributive. It's like saying, that the lamb that I have caught has got only two legs. I won't let go of that argument.
It's rabbit, sir, not lamb.
Hmm?
It is rabbit, not lamb.
It's what?
Rabbit.
Rabbit. Okay. Right. So rabbit it is. I was told it's lamb. Anyway, doesn't matter. Animal. Four-legged. So it's not a distribution. The distributive part is what you find in Marxism. Marxism, because he's changing the very paradigm of what he calls the mode of production. When you move out of the capitalist mode of production and into the communist mode of production, then what are you doing? You are basically creating a new society. I don't know if any of you knows this, but there was a film in Telugu made years ago. When I was a child, I didn't understand it, and I had the good fortune of seeing it again. That name of that film was Maro Prapancham, another world. That's what it is. And the theme is extremely interesting. It is these people who kidnap children. There's a group of people who kidnap children and raise them in a deep, dense forest and in the ravines or ravines, I don't know which is correct, of a forest, and they raise them to understand equality. And I think it was inspired by Plato, the way I look at it. maybe by Marx as well. But when you say another world, what they are doing is that they are recreating a different world, but they're doing it secretly, hoping that one day that they can slowly build it up to a certain extent where uh, more and more people will become like the members who grew up in that settlement. Okay, in that settlement. So when you do something like that, start afresh, then you can say it is distributive. So when the structures of dominance that exist in the economy and in the polity have been completely destroyed by the revolution, and you start anew with a new society, a global society, not one which has nation state boundaries. If you do that, and there you inculcate the idea that everyone gets what he deserves in terms of his needs, because Marx made this famous statement: what will be different from the capitalist mode of production in the communist mode of production is that people will move away from each according to his ability to each according to his needs. That's what he says. So that is distribution.
Sir,
Because, yeah,
in communist mode of production, the forces of demand and supply will not decide the product that
no, no.
a
He is talking about producing only as much as you require. Because for him, one of the things that he talks about in the capitalist society is that you anticipate demand and produce too much, and therefore you have a glut. So, in that sense, Marx was an early environmentalist because he said capitalist society, mode of production, sorry, is something that also denudes the environment uh, by wasting wasting resources. It's like, what we keep reading in newspapers. So many doses of the vaccine have been sent to states, but they have not been used in certain states. And other states which require it are not getting it. And therefore, the ones where the states where there is excess vaccines, they are simply wasting the vaccine. That is the kind of an argument he'll say. So, in the communist mode of production, he will say retain the scientific temperament, retain science and technology, but don't use it for profit. That's why it's a distributive thing. It's a distributive thing. That's why each according to his needs and not according to his abilities.
yes.
Okay. So when you look at the redistribution aspect, I mean, when you're looking at this idea that that have been primary social goods that have been captured by people, you ask them to relinquish them and redistribute them. So, more than distribution, a better term would be redistribution. Redistribution. So far, there has been a certain kind of distribution. Now, what you're saying is let go of what you have held for so long. What you have held for so long, share it with others. So that becomes redistribution rather than distribution. So that is one very, very important thing that you have to remember. His idea of justice, if you want to include the distributive component into it, don't describe it as distributive idea of justice. It is a redistributive idea of justice. First of all, I wouldn't call it a redistributive idea of justice. His idea of justice contains a component of redistribution of the primary social goods. But that is a part of the definition that I have given you, not me. He only has defined it himself. Justice is fairness. Rather, actually, he said justice as fairness. Okay, justice as fairness. In that, he would say, in order to achieve that fairness, start redistributing the primary social goods. So that is the thing that you need to understand. Now, the demystification of the social contract.
Sir,
Yes, ma'am.
I didn't understand this distribution and redistribution. What was distribution and why it is called redistribution?
Distribution is when there is no distribution. There has been no prior distribution. Now, what you do is you are seeing 100 people. You have 1,000 rupees. If you say, all right, let me distribute this money equally to everyone, then what you're doing is giving 10 rupees each to the 100 people. That is distribution. None of these 100 people have anything with them. Okay? So, for the first time, they're being paid and they're all being paid equal wage. That is distribution, which is what Marx is talking about. But people say Marx says that there is a problem of distribution in capitalist society. Definitely, he talks about capitalist society. He talks about the problem of distribution of social wealth in capitalist society. But he does not believe that you can solve this problem of distribution of social wealth in from within the premises of capitalism, for the simple reason that you basically cannot do it. You just cannot do it from those premises. Why can't you do it? Because the capitalist is holding the state machinery in his hand, using it to the hilt. If you raise an agitation, he'll put the agitation down, or they, the capitalists, will put the agitation down. So what do? Go for a bloody revolution. Kill and get killed, But ultimately, because of the numbers of workers being more than the numbers of capitalists, he says that it is the workers who will triumph. The workers will triumph, and once they triumph, they take control of the means of production, which are factories, whatever, all those, which were under the control of the capitalist class. They take hold of the means of production, establish a dictatorship of the proletariat, which is the working class, liquidate class structures in society, and in doing so, you're creating a new society where everyone works. It's not like somebody sits and says, this machinery is mine, this land is mine. So, this machinery is mine, this land is mine, and therefore you will say that uh, I will give you what I think you should get. That is gone. Nobody is sitting back without working. Nobody is arbitrarily deciding how much to pay you. So, in his communist society, there is a fresh beginning where everybody works and everybody gets paid for the work they do, not according to their ability, but according to their need. So, since you're making a fresh beginning, you're changing the very structure of society. You're going to get rid of all these coercive apparatuses that have been built into the state system. You're going to get rid of that. So people will enjoy freedom and they will get the benefits of freshly initiated distribution. That is why in Marx you can call it distribution. But in the case of Rawls, he's not saying get rid of capitalism. He's only putting a caveat, a warning kind of a thing, a caveat telling you you can have capitalism, but you have to put justice into it. And what is this justice that I'm talking about? This justice that I'm talking about is fairness. Fairness is the justice. So, how are we going to achieve this fairness in the existing system? Now, you have too many, you have held the primary social goods for too long. You have all the political rights. Like I said, it includes not just the right to vote and all that. No, all the things like education, nutrition, quality of life, good living, that is, sanitary conditions, all those things will get included in it. They all get included in it. Access to drinking water, all those things. So that is a redistribution. You're asking people, you've held it long enough. If you give it away, you're not going to become poor. You're not going to become poor. Okay, that is what I meant the other day when I talked about reservation. Let go of it now. 2 generations you've taken, let go. Let the other people who are not able to get the reservation, people in rural areas who are sitting with no proper education system, no proper schools, no teachers, give them a chance. Give them a chance. For all the talk about Rajshekar Reddy and his corruption, which I'm sure is pretty accurate, YS Rajshekar Reddy, but there are things that he did which are redistributive. One is that instead of, whereas uh, Rawls is saying that this is something that has to be done voluntarily by those who have held the primary social goods. Instead of that, we find Rajshekar Reddy doing it on some people's behalf, and we don't complain. The idea of uh, Arogyasri, which has now become, KCR has merged it with Ayushman Bharat. I don't know how that'll work. But during Rajshekar Reddy's time, every private super specialty hospital had to give, had to give. Now they have introduced identity cards. In Rajshekar Reddy's time, if you just had a white ration card, that was enough. Take it, show that white ration card, and the government was going to pay the insurance premiums on your behalf. So what were you doing? You were going to the hospital, showing it. Government was also sponsoring lunch and drinking water for one attendant apart from the patient. The government was sponsoring. It's been diluted, but he did that. He did that. He won the goodwill of the people. And I remember I used to get SMSs saying, you want to study medicine, there's nothing stopping you. You want to study engineering, there's nothing stopping you. Go start studying medicine, work for it, the government will pay your fees. Free education through fee reimbursement. So he did that. That's redistribution because you're taking taxpayers' money and you're giving something to the people who have been denied of education, denied of health care. You're doing that. So that is a redistribution of social wealth. You're making sure that the taxpayer's money is not going back to the taxpayer again. You're making sure of that. Okay. So that's why it's called redistribution. You have not changed the system. The system is the same, but you have changed how certain things within that system work. So it is capitalism, it is all that, but there is a difference because now you have introduced this justice, and in order to ensure that this justice is given, you're asking people to give up and redistribute those. You distribute those things. do it through charities, do it through philanthropy. My, I think Padma only asked yesterday that did this work, this voluntary thing. Uh,
Yes, sir. Because the onus is still on general people or the holders. So will they?
yeah, so, but, well, you had the uh, Melinda and Bill Gates Foundation. Now I don't know what its future
Okay.
is. So, uh, Roger Waters, whose songs I have sent to you, he says he's actually a leftist. He says, but I've turned a capitalist the day I became a musician. But I have ensured that after I have become a millionaire, I have ensured that I am giving monies to charities in different parts of the world, not just in the United States of America. He's actually an Englishman, but now lives in the United States of America. And his former band, Pink Floyd, they also give to charities. One of the charities, you'll be surprised, is in the Kolar region of Karnataka, where depressed, so the children of depressed sections, their well-being is taken care of. A number of Hollywood actors, Matt Damon, runs charities in America. He runs a charity in Hyderabad. Do you know that? Two charities in Hyderabad. You must have heard of that Bholakpur area, which is supposed to have the highest rate of contamination in water. Okay, so Matt Damon has a charity to supply these people with fresh water. And if you look at uh, the whole idea of educating the poor children, he was doing it in Rasulpura in Secunderabad. One day I was going there and I thought this man, there's an expensive car and it looked like Matt Damon. And I'm a bit of a Matt Damon fan. So I said, let me just check. How can Matt Damon be here? Why is he doing this? I went and checked and I asked him, are you Matt Damon? And he said, yes, I'm Matt Damon. And I said, what are you doing here? He said, I run this thing here. I'm just trying to see how the schools are doing, how the children are doing. So people are doing charity, not just in their countries, they're also doing it elsewhere now. That thing has come in philanthropy, charity work. It has caught on even in America. Now that it is mandatory globally for corporate social uh, CSR, what does it stand for?
Responsibility.
Responsibility. Corporate social responsibility. As a part of corporate social responsibility, I was able to get a few seminars organized on public policy and governance by getting funds from Tata projects. So there are the CSRs, by the way, are not just for In fact, they rarely give money for seminars and things like that. But since it was also about corporate governance, they funded that seminar. And I keep my seminars very simple and very cost effective. The cost will not exceed 1 lakh. That's how I used to do the seminars. And one of the gripes that people have against me in the department is that I did these things on my own. I only use the university's name, never the department's name. The department has never owned up to and said this is one of us. So I don't say that I am one of them. That's a different issue. That's politics. But people are giving to education. Azim Premji Foundation, for example. Don't look at the university. The number of primary schools in English medium that Azim Premji Foundation is setting up is unbelievable. It's unbelievable. In all remote areas, in very, very remote areas, they're setting up schools. And that's happening even, and Sonu Sood helping out people during this time of lockdown with food. For last 1 year, he's been doing that. I think somebody has to say some nice things about him. Where are all these Americans and all these fellows who talk big rubbish sitting in TV studios? They don't do anything. None of them give a single paisa to charity. My school group has asked everyone to contribute 5,000 rupees so that they can feed so many people over a certain period of time. So you see that it is there. People are doing philanthropy, not on the scale on which Rawls wanted it, but there is definitely philanthropy happening. So it is voluntary. It is voluntary. Musicians, authors who have made truckloads of money, they are all doing philanthropy, setting up hospitals, setting up research centers for diseases that still don't have proper medicines. They're doing that. They're doing that. Anyway, so let's go to the demystification of the contract. Now, somebody asked John Rawls, why should people, if somebody asked John Rawls, why should people accept this thing about justice and justice as fairness? Here he takes recourse to the contract mechanism, and instead of starting with the state of nature, he starts with what he calls the original position. The original position, please understand this very, very carefully. The original position is where you're just a human being. You're almost like a child. You don't know what stratum of society you believe in, you live in. You do not know how many riches you have. You don't know, you haven't yet established your identity. I am so and so, and by being so and so, I don't like so and so. You don't know all these things. So if you ask, if you ask Rawls, how do you get to this original position? He says you have to wear a veil of ignorance. Okay, that is all metaphorical, huh? All these things. All these things are metaphorical. The original position, the veil of ignorance. So, what is the veil of ignorance? It means you're cutting yourself off from everything, and you have gone into that original position where you don't know what your standing in society is. So, all this is leading to it is leading to the unprejudiced position of the individual, which means that I don't see myself as a Hindu and I don't hate Muslims because I'm a Hindu, or I don't see myself as a Muslim and I don't say I am a minority, which are all the various identities we take on. We take on very different identities. It's a very wrong position that people have. It's a wrong supposition that people have that we carry one identity. Really? Do we carry one identity? We have so many different identities, and these identities, that is one point that Amartya Sen also makes, and I agree with him. I agree with him. But he's not the first person to have made that point. Okay? That has been made by various Western scholars, including Joshua Cohen, including Will Kimlicka and Rawls himself. Okay? So we take up various identities. One identity that I have is I'm a professor. Another identity that I have, which my driver has, is that I'm a bank and he can, not a bank, I'm a pot of money and he can ask me for 10,000, 15,000, and I'll give it to him and he'll, so that's one identity I have. Yesterday, I told you, right? I had a breakdown. I mean, not a breakdown. My whole house started giving electric shocks, and somehow managed to get the people from the electricity substation to come. And what do they say? I don't know why one of them calls me Dr. Sub. because I never write doctor anywhere. So it's apparently based in some misunderstanding, unless he's so educated that he sees PhD on my board and therefore says I'm a doctor. I don't think he doesn't seem that educated, but you never know. But he calls me Dr. Sahab and he says, Dr. Sahab, మేము 2 గంటలు, we work for 2 hours. Hmm? These people didn't want to come. I brought them here saying Dr. Saab is a very fair man. He will give us what is our due. And he made me cough up 5,000. So people see you. That's another identity I have. Okay. I have the identity of being a fat man. So God only knows. I'm sure you will have several other identities as all good students. uh, Everybody will give titles, usually very, very derogatory to their teachers. Uh, so I'm sure you'll have many identities ascribed to me. So sometimes we take on our own identities. Sometimes somebody ascribes an identity to you. So all these can lead to prejudices in you. So what he's saying therefore is when you wear the veil of ignorance, then you're forgetting all these identities that are attached to you. You're forgetting all these identities. That is the original position, which is like the state of nature. That's what he himself said. And what is the social contract? The social contract is while you are in the original position, if somebody asks you, what is justice? Okay, what is justice? If you pose this question when somebody is in the original position, then your answer to that will be justice is non denial of opportunity. It will also be how did this become big? Okay, so he says that is a social contract, non denial of opportunity. And he says it is morally incumbent on everybody to honor this. That is what he says. That is justice as fairness. And that is the end of Rawls for this semester. Because I want to teach him in greater detail in the second semester, because that is when you will have done all the other social contractualists and other thinkers of this period. You would have thought of all of them. So that is, I'm going to stop here with Rawls. That is the reason why it is a moral system. It is a moral system. That is the reason why it is redistribution. Fairness is equality of opportunity and providing skills, providing skills for you to compete with others, creating an atmosphere in which you can develop these skills. All these things. So that is, so he's not giving up individualism. If after all this has been done, if after all this has been done, and you still can't make something out of yourself, that means he's going back to the Lockean inequality of consequence. He's going back to the Lockean inequality of consequence. Okay? So, that is Rawls for you. Make sure that everybody is getting an opportunity to prove himself or herself in society. Make sure. Make sure that everybody has a good quality of life with good education, nutritious food, clean and sanitary surroundings, access to health care, all those things. Those are political rights. So that is what it means. Any questions? I feel like I'm teaching in Saudi Arabia.
Why, sir?
Hmm?
Why, sir?
In Saudi Arabia, apparently, a friend of mine went there to teach in a university, and he didn't realize that it was a women's university or a women's university. Sorry. Okay, so they made him sit in a studio and give lectures, and he was visible in the classroom to the students, but he was giving a lecture in the studio, which had nothing other than a mic. So He didn't see a single student of his ever while he was in Saudi Arabia. And so he came back, he said, it's very difficult to imagine that you have an audience. So, anyway, that's just a joke. Don't take it seriously. So, any questions?
Yes, sir. Uh, Sir, so this kind of justice of Rawls, this can be termed as social justice, or any distinctions can be made in this?
Social justice, I wouldn't call it that because social justice is something that is provided to entire social groups. Social justice is the system of justice that is provided to entire social groups, not just to individuals. In fact, one of the criticisms, uh, you mentioned that book by Sushila Ramaswamy and Subrato Mukherjee.
Yes,
Uh,
sir.
yeah, so incidentally,
Latter two marks.
yeah, uh, Sushila Ramaswamy, in the book that I'm editing, I finished editing. I have to write the introduction now. And that particular book, she wrote a paper. Her PhD is on, uh, what should I say? Her PhD is on Rawls, I think. And she said, she and I had a big disagreement about this. Uh, she's a very gracious lady, so she didn't take it badly. She says that the individual that Rawls is talking about is an abstract individual. I said, no, the individual that Rawls is talking about is not an abstract individual. You are committing the same mistake that is being that was committed by Michael Sandel in his critique of Rawls. How is he an abstract individual when you're saying that there are two types of individual? One who is the privileged individual, the individual who has all these political rights and the primary social goods. How is he an abstract entity? He's a real entity. You can point out several such people. Not in America. I'll point them out here. I said I'll point them out among among the people who are sitting here. I can point out who are the privileged and who are not the privileged. So how can you basically say it's an abstract person or an abstract entity? It's not. So it is justice, but at the level of individualism only. Because please remember that while he is saying that you have to let go of these opportunities, give them an equality of beginning. That's all he's saying. Don't say that they have an equality of beginning when they don't have an equality of beginning. So the moral component and all that are basically to provide individuals with opportunities to develop themselves. So he's not talking about this leading to social good. He's not. The only thing that comes close to the idea of a society in him, which is very nebulous, like I said, in all other uh, individualist thinkers, including the social contractualists, uh, is this obligation, this moral obligation that you have to part with your social goods that you have held on for so long, and uh, sharing it with them so that they can also compete with you. Now, in the competition, who wins, who fails, we don't know. But some will win, some will fail. They're bound to be failures. But you have to consider this fact that justice is fairness. And from there, he also goes on to make a statement in one of his essays that even democracy has to turn into a system of fairness. That's where again the political rights become very important. I actually wanted to do this next in the second semester. I'm just making that point. He says democracy should also be about fairness, not just justice. So he is talking about it, but apart from this individual obligation towards another individual, which is a moral obligation. If you have too much money, you don't need that much money. Part with it. Part with it so that other people can get the primary social goods. So it's not a system of social justice. What Marx had in mind was a system of social justice. This is not. It is individualism. That's why it is liberalism. Because one of the first principles of liberalism of any kind is individualism. So
Yes,
he
sir.
he just has a small little thing of obligation. That's about it. So he's an individualist.
Right.
Okay. Akshay Puneet ji,
Sir, is Rawls is willing to establish a egalitarian society or
not, I can't say, I think that would be stretching the argument too far. An egalitarian society? No. No. It is an egalitarian society to the extent that the society does not deny opportunities so that people can make something out of themselves. To that extent, it is egalitarian. But a society which is egalitarian in terms of the distributive component, where, there is an egalitarian distribution of wealth. No, that is not talking about. That's why I said it's not distribution. It's redistribution of only the primary social goods. Okay, so egalitarian society will make it a very tenuous argument. Some people do say that he was trying to establish an egalitarian society, but I don't agree with that because I don't think he's trying to create an egalitarian society. All that he's trying to say is give everyone an equal opportunity to make something out of their lives, and after that, it is entirely up to them. He's leaving it up to the people. So it is not a good idea to say that he is trying to establish an egalitarian society.
Providing basic amenities.
Yes, those are there, but those are primary social goods. They will, in themselves, not constitute an egalitarian society. But having said that, I must tell you that, all of us have all kinds of conceptions about America. What I have learned in my visits to America is that perhaps America is more of an egalitarian society than even we are. Okay, we talk about a lot of things about equality. We say a post colonial state is something that, all that is true. All that is true. I'm not denying that. But if you look at America, the fact that there is a dignity of labor, I haven't seen it in any other country. I've not seen it in any other country. I think I told you, narrated this story. There was this chap who was driving me from uh, Virginia. So, sorry, from Gettysburg to the University of Virginia. He was accompanying me, not driving me. Uh, and he was somebody who was what we call postgraduate and they call graduate. For them, BA, bachelor's is undergraduate, master's is graduate. So let's say master's, he had finished his master's in political science, and I asked him, so Eric, what does your father do? And he says, my father is a laborer. There's no sense of shame, no sense of inferiority. It's a prompt answer without hesitation. My father is a laborer. I said, what does he do? He paints footpaths just as we paint them yellow and black here. They're also there. They paint. And he says he worked very hard to put me through this education system. And I'm very proud of him. In America, if you earn your money without cheating, without duping people, if you earn your money, whoever you may be, people will treat you with dignity. If you, as long as you're earning your money without underhand means, even the janitors, they are also, I have seen in the corridors of various universities, professors saying, initiating a conversation, saying hello and initiating a conversation with a janitor. Will we do that here? We don't. We don't. And there is a reason behind it because most of the people who went to America were not the affluent people. They were the poorer sections of European society who went to America. So therefore, there's this great dignity of labor. People are not treated badly just because they don't hold a very high position. None of those things happen. None of those. So I don't know if in monetary terms, no, it's not egalitarian at all. But by and large, except for some prejudices against races, uh, they are by and large people who respect uh, those who have earned their money legally and through hard work. They are
Sir,
appreciated. Yeah.
for Rawls, doing retributive justice, redistributive justice
Uh,
is the duty of government or
individuals, like I told you, it's a voluntary thing. Yesterday I
voluntary.
had put it voluntary but morally incumbent. Morally incumbent. If you want to be a morally good person, that is why he's traced back to Kant. I'll do that in the other this thing. And to Rousseau. Okay. There is a very strong moral component. That whole system of justice as fairness, redistribution, it's all an appeal to your conscience, which is a moral thing. There's a saying in English, I think you know, everybody knows it. The conscience is the keeper of our morality. And so when somebody does something bad, people say, don't you have a conscience? That's a question people ask. So he's asking them to be conscientious and carry out their responsibility towards the others.
But capitalism does not have any morals.
It doesn't. It doesn't. But he's not asking you to give away your capital. He's asking you to give away your primary social goods that you have cornered. When you have so much wealth, what will you do with it? Hmm? What will you do with so much wealth? Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, these are people who have more money than most countries in Africa, and yet they don't do any good. It's always the artists who do good somehow. So,
Yes, sir.
okay. Anything else?
No, sir.
Okay then. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. I'll see
Thank
you.
you,
Thank you,
sir.
sir.
Yeah, tomorrow we'll do libertarianism.
Yes, sir.
It needs only one class. Just
Okay,
one
sir. Thank
class.
you very much.
Sorry?
Okay.
Okay. Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.